This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up and welcome to Hot Takes, the show where I react to the comments that you leave in the comment section all week. Ton of comments to get into, to be honest with you. So in lieu of this being a 40-hour video, let's go ahead and jump into the first. The comments from this video are from Deshaun Watson's magnum opus. This is the Week 10 rewatch video of the Browns versus Ravens game. Oh no, I'm doing a rewatch of the 2023 season. It's been a fun series. Make sure you check that out. All right, so the first comment from this video is Frank says, I mentioned last year about the game, how he put it all on the line for his team and definitely has heart after the mainstream media was questioning his integrity, saying his money is guaranteed. He doesn't have to play if he doesn't want to. Two things to point out here. One thing to point out is how ridiculous those accusations were, and they were everywhere at the time. Like, I think they were not just national. I think people locally were speculating on if Deshaun Watson was really injured or not. We know now he was clearly injured, right? He was clearly injured. He clearly would have played if he could have played, but a lot of people, the second they got anything to jumped on it, and that was what they jumped on, which is he's lazy, he doesn't want to play, all this stuff. The second thing I want to talk about is there are a lot of people in media, and I think this is right, by the way. There are a lot of people in media who have made progress on how they talk about athletes, especially as it pertains to money. Significant progress that I think is very good to get better coverage, one, and to just talk about the game more humanely, right? Because sometimes we forget that they're human beings that play this game, and they're not robots, right? And we tend to talk about them like that. And a lot of those people have made a point to make less of a habit, if they ever even did in the first place, of calling a player lazy, especially, or questioning a player's integrity, especially when it comes to an injury. We have made significant progress on that front, like media-wide, to make sure that we are a lot more responsible about how we talk about integrity as it comes to injury. And those are good things. The thing I want to point out is, it's interesting how fast a lot of people in the media backslid into bad habits the second they got an excuse to do it. Because if this were Christian McCaffrey, if this were Trevor Lawrence, if this were Patrick Mahomes, if this were any other well-liked athlete, this kind of speculation would not be allowed on national media shows. It would not be allowed to grow as unchallenged as it did. But because the person that you're accusing of this is unlikable, it was allowed to spread like a virus, even though it was completely false. And the main point I have with a lot of my Deshaun Watson coverage, and the point of frustration I have with a lot of people in media about covering Deshaun Watson, is just because you don't like him does not give you a license to do all of the stuff you're not supposed to do. You have to be fair, right? I believe in being fair and honest about the things I talk about, especially on this channel. And that doesn't change when I don't like a player. That doesn't change when a player does something I don't like. That's happened before. It cannot change because that has to stay the same. So if we want to be better about how we talk about these athletes, if we want to be better about how we speak about injuries as it relates to money. If you don't like when a player you like gets called lazy or gets accused of faking an injury because they have money in the bank, if you don't like that kind of speculation, it's important that you don't do that, especially with people you don't like, because just because you can do it unchallenged does not mean that that does not have harmful effects, because now that stuff's going to be coming up with other players because they was allowed to go on with Deshaun Watson at this unchallenged level. And then when you don't do it with other players, people are like, whoa, you said this about Deshaun. Just don't bite the forbidden fruit, right? We have made a move to get away from that kind of speculation. And not liking a player is not justification to go back to a bad habit. It's just a bad habit. And to people who give me all kind of excuses on why it's justified to do it to Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson's a bad person in their mind, whatever. Bad habits have the best excuses. It doesn't mean you should still do them. But that's why it irked me, that whole thing, just from a professional level, how many people backslid into some truly awful takes that we have really made an effort to get away from. But it was interesting seeing who had no problem backsliding, which tells me that, some of these people might be changing just to be performative, not really to actually because they care, which is concerning. Doug says, another thing people don't pay attention to or will overlook, the Ravens were dominant at home at this point of the season. We went in there and beat them at our absolute best, or at their absolute best, while not even being close to our best. Yes. This is why I said after that game, that was a win that happens when you are just the better team. On the road, you're down 3 tackles, right? DeJuan Jones, Jack Conklin, and Jed Wills. You got Garyon Conley or whatever his name was, Garyon Christian at left tackle. He was on the street in October. You have at right tackle James Hudson, who's a career backup. No disrespect to James Hudson. And then you have literally your whole secondary got injured. I think Denzel Ward went out, Juan Thornhill went out, Grant Delpit went out in that game. And you were still able to come back. And it wasn't because the Ravens were messing up. Yes, they threw a pick six, but that pick six was created because Obo Okoronkwo got his hands up and blocked the pass in the air that just got caught. It wasn't because Lamar Jackson was playing awful. They just adjusted to what the Ravens were doing, stopped it, and then made plays on offense and on defense. The Cleveland Browns, with Deshaun Watson, no Nick Chubb, were the better team than the Baltimore Ravens. And that's why I'm super excited about this year, because what could they be with all of the stuff healthy? So yeah, that was a very overlooked element of that. Also, the Ravens were playing their best ball of the year at that time. They played good football after that game. They played good football before that game. They were in the middle of their best stretch of football, and they lost that game at home after being up 14. And if we keep it in a buck about how the Ravens got up 14 both times, 2 lucky plays. Well, you can argue that the Kyle Hamilton play was a good skill play by Kyle. Kyle just made a play to get a pick six there. So they got that one, right? But that muff punt by James Prochet that brought it up to 15 in the fourth quarter, that really was luck, right? So it's interesting. Also, they got a touchdown with Odell Beckham when he was covered by Mike Ford because we had injuries, and Mike Ford just stinks as a coverage corner. He's a good safe special teams guy, but if you look at how both teams scored in that game, one team scores, feels a lot more flukish than the other team scores, and the team with the flukish scores was the 1 seed, and the team with the non-flukish scores was the Browns on the road. Yes, that is a very underrated part of that game that I think a lot of people forgot, because again, once you get further away, you only look at the box score, and the box score tells 2% of the story. Daniel says, what's even crazier to me is the narrative that the second half wasn't impressive because it was dink and dunk. Never mind the injuries that he played through. But when Mahomes beats the same team, essentially the same way to go to the Super Bowl, he gets all the credit in the world. Funny how that works. You know how that works, right? And the way that works is because people are starting with the conclusion with both players and working backwards to prove it. And that is always going to result in inconsistent and bad takes. When you start at a conclusion and you only look for ways to affirm it, you're always going to say something stupid. What you should always try to do is you have your conclusion that you think is true, and then you work really hard to disprove your own conclusion. So if my conclusion is Deshaun Watson was bad, I'm going to look for every bit of evidence to prove that he was good, to make sure that my conclusion holds up. That's the scientific process, right? But what a lot of people unfortunately do in media, especially like talking head national media stuff, is they start with their conclusion, they work backwards. So when you start with the conclusion that Pat Mahomes is brilliant and you work backwards to prove it in that game, oh, look how he dinked and dunked. Look how he just lulled the Ravens to sleep. Look how he was so patient against the Ravens, and how he waited until the end of the game to really hit him with the big bomb. And that's why Pat Mahomes is brilliant, right? You work backwards to prove that conclusion. Now with Deshaun Watson, if you start with the conclusion that he really isn't that good, you're going to work backwards to prove it. Well, look at the passes. They're not very complicated. Look at, he didn't throw any deep balls. It wasn't anything crazy. It's not anything super highlight worthy. It wasn't that impressive. Both drives, both games by both quarterbacks are impressive. Why? Because it happened against the number two defense in the NFL. In Baltimore, both quarterbacks did that on the road. Came back. Well, the Browns came back. I don't believe the Chiefs had to come back, but won a big game in Baltimore against a great defense. And people tell me all the time, Roquan Smith is the second coming of Ray Lewis. Even though, you ain't never seen him look like no damn Ray Lewis, but they tell me this, right? So, this is something they believe, that Roquan is this G on defense. That's why it's impressive, right? And again, Roquan Smith is a decent player, a good player. He ain't what they think he is, but I'm just gonna have to die on that hill. But that's how you work back and you prove something. Similar. Let's talk about Roquan Smith. Hell, while we at it, I know this is off topic as hell, but let's talk about Roquan Smith while we at it. The reason people think Roquan Smith is good is because so many people have started with a conclusion that Roquan Smith is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and have worked backwards to prove it. Case in point, what's the number one thing every Raven fan tells you on why Roquan Smith is good? Well, when Roquan Smith showed up, the defense got better. Okay. How do you know that has anything to do with Roquan Smith? We're just assuming a lot of this, right? Like, because you're working backwards, you're saying Roquan Smith must be good, so we have to find something that says he is good. You can't find stats that say he's that good other than tackle numbers, which we know are malarkey. Nobody care about your overall tackle numbers. His average depth of tackle numbers are not great. Like his TFL numbers aren't great. His stop numbers are all right. They're pretty good, but they not like elite linebacker good. What can we add to prove this conclusion that we started with? Work backwards just to affirm what we said. Oh, the defense got better when Roquan showed up. Now, that might have something to do with the new defensive coordinator that also came around the same time Roquan did that same year. That might have to do with the fact that Pat Queen just kind of figured it out. Might have to do with the Ravens defense actually being healthy after they traded for Roquan Smith. But I'm going to work backwards to prove it, right? That's how that works. Too many people start with conclusions and don't try to disprove what they think because they just want to be affirmed. They don't want to be challenged. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. The comments from this video are from Deontay Foreman. It's a Kareem Hunt replacement. His 24th ranking on my Browns 25. Get Awesome Gaming says, I'm really interested in Aiden Robbins, UDFA, 6'3", 237 pounds, bounced around, had some injury issues, but when he was healthy the year, he produced well. Granted, UDFA, so it's likely he's a diamond in the rough, but if he is, the measurables are fantastic. Yeah, I mean, with UDFAs, I don't ever want to put expectations on him because it's not fair to them to put expectations on him. We'll see how he looks in the preseason. I will say this: he has captured the imagination of a lot of online Browns fans, because like the comment section, almost every video I do that has anything to do with running backs brings up Aidan Robbins. So his highlight tape must be fantastic, and maybe I need to look into more Aidan Robbins and do a video on him to kind of talk about how I feel about him as a prospect, because I haven't really, because he's a UDFA. And check him out, because a lot of y'all love Aidan Robbins. So I might have to check out and see what's going on with that. The next comments come from Who Can the Browns Steal from the UFL. Shout out to my guy Kyron, who helped me with this video. Seven says, I never thought of it this way until the guest described the mission. But spring football, while not expressly affiliated with the NFL, are like the G Leagues in the NBA, and they are like the MLS to fading European stars. I think that's really the template for the UFL. The UFL should look to be the MLS, because no, the MLS is not a A-tier sport in America, right? I think the A-tier sports, the number one, like most popular sports, baseball, football, basketball, those are mainstream. You can argue if baseball is still in there, but I think baseball, people care about the World Series, people care about the NBA Finals, people care about the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, the NFL is like in a tier by itself, but if we're just talking about the three popular sports, that's there, right? You know, the NFL is Kendrick, and then Drake and J. Cole out there battling out for 2 and 3. That's how that works right there. So then you have this second tier of leagues, like the NHL. What other leagues kind of fit into tennis, right? Tennis is in there. Golf is in there. Boxing is in there. I guess you could throw UFC in the A tier, because UFC is insanely popular. So we would throw UFC retroactively into the A tier. But then you have like the golf, tennis, all that stuff. And those sports are still the best in the world. It's still semi-US centric. It's just not as popular as the MLB, the NBA, and the NFL, right? Still best in the world at what they do, still high quality stuff, still the pinnacle of their sports when it comes to the US Open, or well, they're both US Opens, golf and tennis, but you know, those things are important. So those are like the B tier. And then you have the C tier, which are emerging leagues that have fan bases around them, that have that can last for a while, right? And that's where the UFL wants to be at, right? In that C tier, you have things like the MLS, you have things like the WNBA. Back in the day, you used to have arena football kind of fall in this slot. And just because it's not A or B, right, one of those mainstream popular sports, and the WNBA seems to be moving its way into that B tier, which I think will be very good for it, because I like the product that they have there. I think that's where the UFL wants to be. And the MLS is also in that C tier, right, where it's like, it's not the best in the world, but it's a fun little league, right? And they have 20, 30,000 people in the seats there pretty consistently at these games. They have fun fan bases. Like, it's not something that a lot of people are in, but if you're in that bubble, you're having a lot of fun in the MLS. There's probably all kind of inner arguments between like what the MLS should not be doing, all that stuff, but really it matters. So that's where the UFL should be. The UFL wants to be in that spot. That's where they want to occupy. They want to get to a place to where they can have guys who can make $300K working for the UFL. And then you can have, you know, like a Julio Jones or a star at the twilight, like a Matt Ryan, you know, play the last couple of their active years on a lower level and kind of recapture some of that magic, to have some of that star power, some of that draw. So that's what I think the template should be. The template should be what the WNBA has done over the last 5 years. The template should be what the MLS has done over the last 5 years, because quietly, those two leagues have been pushing their way from C tier into B tier when it comes to American sports. And they've done it by building the fan bases that already exist within them. And now we're seeing stuff like purpose-built stadiums for MLS teams. A lot of them have those now. You're seeing stuff like practice facilities and purpose-built exclusively for WNBA practice facilities getting built for these women based on the stuff they've done over the last 5 years. And I think if you're the UFL, you want to get to the point where you can move away from the hub and you can start to build a practice facility for St. Louis. Or maybe like one of your teams gets popular enough to where you could build a nice little 10 to 15,000 seat stadium, or share one with the soccer team, or, have some purpose built stuff for the UFL. So I think over the next 10, 15 years, that should be the goal for the UFL, is to, one, get into C tier, because right now they're in D tier. Like, they're the most popular thing in D tier, but they're in D tier. They need to get into C tier and then follow the templates that the MLS and the WNBA have to get past that tier of C tier into B tier. And once you're in B tier, you're good. Like the NHL, they're fine. Like all these other sports in the B tier, they're fine. You're not going to crack A tier. The UFL is just never going to do that. But again, you could be a fun thing, right? And if you can be a fun thing, you'd be profitable. People make money, more stuff to watch, more entertainment. Everybody wins. The genius of Jameis, and the reason I wanted to make this video was Jameis is a big personality, right? He's goofy, he's hilarious, he has hilarious press conference clips, hilarious memes, some hilarious stat lines. Like, he got 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, also threw 30 interceptions. And behind all the jokes, with all the jokes, the memes, and the clips and the press conference stuff, it gets easy to forget what Jameis brings to the table as a football player and not just as a personality. And I want to highlight what Jameis brings as a football player. And what Jameis brings as a football player is something you wouldn't expect for somebody who has the reputation that Jameis has, which is he's a legit football savant. And I think that's the number one thing the Browns coveted, on top of his arm, on top of his experience in spread systems. On top of all of that, they coveted that mind that Jameis Winston has. And I think that got overlooked with all of the jokes that, Jameis kind of brings on himself, or does himself. Scorpion said Jameis is one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. If Deshaun Watson can step it up with Dorsey's offense and Foreman running the ball till Chubb gets back, hopefully, but he won't be able to play if he has to step in, or hopefully he won't have to play if he has to step in. Deshaun is injured and there's not many backups I would rather have other than Jameis, that has proven he can win games. He's a younger Flacco, slinging it wherever a player is, whether or not it's the guy or the opponent is up to discussion, but he will get the ball there no matter. Nonetheless, love the signing. All right, so two things. One, I think the big difference between Jameis Winston and Joe Flacco is very experienced with the Kubiak system. The Browns are trying to move away from some of those fundamentals in the Kubiak system into something more akin to what Ken Dorsey has done. And Ken Dorsey has experience in both systems, but it's going to be more shotgun oriented, and that's where Jameis Winston has had a ton of his experience at. So that was one of the things where they wanted to move to. Two, and I think this is a great point that you bring up here about Jameis being one of the best backups in the NFL. Let's talk about real quick what a good backup is supposed to provide for your team. A good backup is somebody who, if your starter gets injured, no matter how good they are, you can ask yourself this question: is the season over? And the answer should be yes. That's how you know you have a great backup. And if Deshaun Watson gets injured, our ceiling is not as high. The Browns are not going to win the Super Bowl if Deshaun Watson gets injured, more than likely. But the season's not over. You can easily make the playoffs with Jameis Winston as your starting quarterback. And I think that's why he's here as well. I rewatched. The next batch of comments are from I rewatched all of Deshaun Watson's starts. The Book of Kenny says, good point at 925. I'm a Texans fan too, and I agree we never built around Deshaun Watson. Besides his rookie season, B.O.B., Bill O'Brien, did not make a system around Watson's strengths, and they even traded his best weapon in 2020. I said all last season that Watson did not play bad except for the Steelers game. I really thought he had figured it out after the Baltimore game. As long as he plays a full season, which is likely because Watson normally does, I have full confidence in him playing well and leading the Browns to the playoffs. We talk about Houston Deshaun Watson in Cleveland so much that I think we don't understand that we weren't there in Houston when Deshaun Watson was there. So like, we need to understand we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to Houston Deshaun Watson. That's why I really wanted to talk to, and I might have to bring him on the channel just to talk about this. My guy Cody, who is a beat reporter for not just the Houston Texans, but the Houston Rockets, really embedded down there with Houston sports. And I was having a conversation with him about Deshaun, and he brought this point up that they never built around him. And if you only listen to Cleveland people talk about his time in Houston, you would never expect that because we swear they had a Deshaun Watson system. It's one of those points that I think has gone under the radar. What that means, we'll see this season, but Deshaun has never had a system around him. And Houston is not what you want to emulate when it comes to building around Deshaun Watson, because for as good as his numbers weren't in Houston, the team success was not there. So that might have not been the most conducive way to use him when it comes to winning football games, is the point there. John W says, the narrative of Watson has changed dramatically since the Baltimore game. I remember after that game, the fan base was easily the most positive it's ever been towards him since he joined the Cleveland Browns. Then once we started Flacco and he was playing exciting football, people started to turn against Watson again. By the offseason, everybody went back into full hating on Watson. Meanwhile, the guy had not played a single snap. It just shows when people decide they don't like somebody, the extent they will go to portray them negatively as possible, and how short their memories will be to anything positive that they do. Part of this is just recency bias. The other part of it is people using Joe Flacco's success against Deshaun Watson in what I always felt was a weird way, because I don't think you can legitimately look me in the eye and make the argument that Deshaun Watson was not better than Joe Flacco. But so many people did that a lot of people started to think that, right? And it just led to this whole mess of things. All I know is that when Deshaun Watson got hurt last year, we thought the Browns had the best team in the NFL with him at quarterback. With Joe Flacco, we thought we had a fun team. Clearly, the team was better with Deshaun Watson. When Deshaun Watson was out there, the point differential for the regular season was plus 63, which was similar to the Kansas City Chiefs, who ended up winning the Super Bowl. With Joe Flacco, it was plus 10, right? And again, we should not be comparing the two. Joe Flacco did an excellent job for what he was asked to do. And what he was asked to do was hold it down and do enough to make sure the defense can win the games. And that's what Joe did. Deshaun, he's tasked to do much more. And I think he was on track to do much more, but he didn't ultimately put up the type of numbers that would be undeniable. And this goes to the main point of what it's going to be for Deshaun for him to get credit. He's just going to have to be undeniable, right? If you're looking for Deshaun Watson, for people to praise him, he is so unlikable at this point for reasons not related to football that he's going to have to be undeniable to get people to praise him about football. Like, that's just gonna be what it is, and that is fine. But yeah, that's just what it is with Deshaun. He has to be undeniable. He has to put up great numbers, and that's just kind of where we're at with him. But that's the comments for this week. Y'all have a great day. Have a great rest of your night.